All my life, people noticed my beauty, but I never tried to use it to my advantage when I was younger. I dreamed of becoming a model back then, but that dream ended when Mark came into my life. "We don't need the money, so I don't want you to do it," he said. And back then, his decision became my decision now. At 42, I'm living in the house of the man who changed the course of my life, sharing it with his son from his first marriage, 23-year-old Jake. Jake just graduated from university where he studied photography and visual arts, and he's back home now. His space is upstairs in the duplex top floor. It's his creative sanctuary. He draws portraits of women constantly. Young girls come and go, often sitting for his work. At first I thought it was just about his passion for art, but everything changed. The day I accidentally left his door slightly open. How could I have known that an innocent portrait sketch would lead to all this? I'm going to tell you how that one night with Jake turned into something far beyond just helping him. I know you'll judge me for this, but I can't keep it a secret anymore. That morning, Mark had already left for work. I went upstairs and Jake's door was slightly ajar. I wasn't planning on going in, but as I walked past, my eyes caught a glimpse of the canvas inside. What I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. It was my portrait, but what shook me even more was the large photo pinned to the wall beside it. It was a photo I had posted on social media years ago. Every line on my face, the depth in my eyes, even the emotions I was feeling at that moment were captured in this painting. I hadn't realized Jake had studied me so closely. And now seeing that he had downloaded my photo and printed it to create this portrait, it should have scared me, right? But it didn't for a moment. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart was racing, and a wave of excitement, and something else, something I couldn't quite name, washed over me. The version of me in that painting was different, stronger, more captivating. Jake had drawn me as more than I thought I was. My hands trembled as I touched the edge of the doorframe. I couldn't stay there any longer, quietly. I turned and made my way back downstairs. My footsteps ellied me to the kitchen, but my heart was still racing. The image of that painting stayed in my mind. I thought it was just going to be another piece of art, but I was wrong. I couldn't have imagined that moment would become something real. Ever since Jake returned home, there's been this energy between us, something I can't quite explain. At first, everything felt normal, even warm, but over time, I noticed Jake withdrawing. He started spending more and more time upstairs, locked away in his room, working for hours. His door was usually closed, but the other day it was accidentally left open for just a moment. That moment burned into my mind. He had drawn me. He had downloaded one of my photos from social media and brought it to life on this canvas. Every brush stroke felt like it revealed a part of me, like he wasn't just painting my face, but my soul. When I saw that painting, something inside me stirred, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything to Jake about it the next day. Loud voices from upstairs caught my attention. A girl was yelling, her voice sharp and angry. Before I could make sense of it, the door to Jake's room flew open and the girl stormed out. Her face was red with fury, tears streaming down her cheeks as she hurried past me in the hallway. My heart raced. Should I go upstairs? I hesitated, torn between staying out of it and finding out what had happened. In the end, I couldn't stop myself. I found myself at Jake's door. "Jake," I said, my voice hesitant. I heard a sigh from inside. "Come in," he said, his voice tired and vulnerable. I pushed the door open slightly and stepped in. He was standing in the middle of the room, staring at a canvas. The painting wasn't finished. The colors and details were flawless. But the whole thing still looked incomplete. "What's going on?" I asked, unable to hide the concern in my voice. Jake lowered his head, then slowly turned to face me. There was a kind of helplessness in his eyes. "That portrait," he said, his voice carrying a hint of defeat. "I had a deal for it, a big project. The client wanted a portrait of a graceful, strong, beautiful woman. They offered a lot of money. But it's not just about the money, Judith. This is my reputation. This project could open doors for my career. But when I was working on that girl's portrait, I realized it wasn't going to work. He wouldn't have liked it. I would have let him down. His voice shook. And now I need to deliver something new by tomorrow. It's really important. As I listened to his words, my heart started racing. His eyes were locked on mine, holding a silent plea at that moment. I thought about the painting I saw the other day and the way Jake was looking at me now. "Jake, what are you asking of me?" I said, my voice trembling. He swallowed hard, then took a deep breath. "Judith, I want to draw you. You're the one who's truly strong, graceful, and beautiful." I froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. "But is that even right?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jake stepped closer, his eyes full of both determination and admiration. "Judith, you might not realize it, but it's you, your beauty, your elegance, your strength. It's all in you, and I need you to help me finish this. I don't have time, and I need you. If you agree, we can do this quietly together." A part of me was screaming that I should say no right away, but another part was drawn to Jake's words, the warmth in his eyes, the honesty in his voice, and I couldn't stop thinking about that painting, the way he saw me, the way it made me feel. "Jake, are you sure?" I asked, meeting his gaze. "I've never been more sure," he said, his voice low but steady. "This isn't just a painting, Judith. This will change everything." There was a pause. My heart was pounding. I was questioning whether this was the right thing to do when my eyes caught the outfit Jake was holding. It was a black silk dress that clung to the body. It left the shoulders bare and draped elegantly to reveal just the right amount of leg. "This is a bit much," I said, letting out a small nervous laugh. Jake took another step closer, his eyes warm and steady. "It'll look perfect on you, and I just want to see you at your best. Trust me, Judith." I took a deep breath. My hesitation slowly melted away under Jake's heartfelt compliments. I nodded slightly. "All right, let's do it." Jake smiled, that warm, genuine smile, eased every fear I had in my heart, and in that moment we began waiting for the night to come. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't just be about a painting. Tonight was going to change everything for both of us. When Mark came home, I did everything I could to make sure everything seemed normal. I stayed quiet during dinner, and Jake acted like nothing was going on, but every time our eyes met, even for a second, the unspoken tension between us hung heavy in the air once I was sure Mark had fallen asleep. I took a deep breath. My heart was racing as I quietly made my way upstairs to Jake's room. I gently pushed the door open. The room was lit with a soft, warm glow. Candles flickered in every corner, filling the space with a cozy warmth. Soft music played in the background, making the atmosphere even more inviting. Jake was standing in the corner with a bottle of wine in his hand. He raised his glass. "Toward me, welcome," he said. His voice calm but carrying a certain warmth. "This place?" I said, my eyes scanning the setup in the room. "It's so well thought out. Tonight is special," he said with a faint smile. "Everything needs to be perfect for you." I swallowed hard, but a small smile found its way to my lips in that moment. Instead of questioning what I was doing, I decided to live in the moment. Jake gestured toward the corner of the room. "I set up a space for you to get ready. Your dress is over there." I nodded and walked to the corner. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Jake had turned his back to me. That small gesture eased some of my nervousness. I picked up the dress and slipped it on, glancing at myself in the mirror. The black silk hugged my body perfectly. My shoulders were bare, and the neckline framed my collarbone beautifully. "Jake, I'm ready," I said, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. He turned around and his eyes locked on me. There was admiration in them. Not the kind an artist has for their subject, but the kind a man has for a woman. "Perfect," he said slowly, raising his glass again. "Can you sit in that chair?" I approached the chair. He pointed to it, with elegant antique looking, with a charm that matched the atmosphere. As I sat down, a mix of excitement and nervousness rushed through me. Jake poured a glass of wine and handed it to me. "You need to relax tonight. The wine will help." I took a sip, our eyes meeting again. "I shouldn't drink too much, or I might relax too much," I said with a soft smile. Jake laughed as he pulled his chair over to his easel. You deserve this tonight. It's all about you, seeing you, feeling your presence. It's going to complete this painting for a while. Silence filled the room. The intensity in the air was undeniable as Jake's eyes alternated between me and the canvas, his brush moving in deliberate strokes. I knew I should have looked away, but I couldn't. I took another sip of wine and glanced at him. Isn't it hard to work like this? I asked, my voice a mix of nervousness and warmth. Hard, he said with a small laugh. Quite the opposite. This moment right now, it feels like the most real thing I've ever done. He paused for a second, lowering his brush and looking straight into my eyes. Judith, do you realize it's not just beauty? I've never seen someone so graceful and strong at the same time. His words left me stunned. Jake, you're overdoing it, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I could feel how much they affected me. I'm not exaggerating, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. I'm honestly just lucky to be sharing this moment with someone like you. And drawing you isn't just work for me. It's a way of understanding you in that moment. The tension in the room became almost tangible. He picked up his brush again, but his movements were slower now. His eyes kept drifting from the canvas back to me. The night's just getting started, he said with a faint smile. When this painting is finished, nothing will ever be the same. I took another sip of my wine, and suddenly I understood what he meant. This night wasn't just about a portrait. This night was going to change. US.AS. I sat in the chair. I lost all sense of time. Jake was seated in front of the canvas, every brush stroke feeling like a piece of his soul. Every now and then he'd pause, glance at me, and in his eyes I could see more than an artist's admiration. It was a man's admiration. With the wine in my hand, I found myself relaxing more and more with every sip. Every 30 minutes or so, Jake would stop for a break. During the first break, we only exchanged a few words. His eyes studied me, but there was still a line he didn't cross. By the second break, that line started to blur. Whether it was the wine or the tension between us, I couldn't tell. When he came closer and gently took my hand, I froze. Judith, you look stunning, he said. His voice warm and soft. I stayed still for a moment, letting the sensation of his fingers on mine sink in. It was during the third break that the line between us all but disappeared. Jake reached out gently, tucking a strand of hair that had fallen over my shoulder back in place. My breath caught. Judith, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. This painting, it won't do your beauty justice, but I'll try that touch. In those words brought us even closer with every break. And yet somehow we managed to stay just on the edge without fully crossing that boundary. By the end of the night, 3 hours had passed. Jake took one final stroke with his brush and leaned back, setting it down with a deep breath. It's done, he said, his eyes bright with excitement. Are you ready? I stood up, finishing the last sip of my wine. I was slightly tipsy, but my mind was clear. I walked over to him, my heart racing when I saw the painting. My breath hitched. This, I said, unable to take my eyes off the canvas. This is incredible, Jake. The woman in the painting was me, but Jake hadn't just captured me physically, he captured something deeper. The emotions in my eyes, the grace in my posture. Even the strength I hadn't realized I carried it was all there on the canvas. Jake turned to me. You're incredible, Judith. This isn't just a painting of you. It's you, your beauty, your strength. Everything in that moment, I couldn't control my emotions. I stepped toward him, wrapping my arms around his neck. Thank you, I whispered, my voice trembling at first. The hug was innocent, but when Jake's arms wrapped around my waist and he leaned closer to my face, something inside me shifted. It was as if every boundary between us had disappeared. Our breaths intertwined, and the flickering candlelight in the room made everything feel even more surreal. Jake, I started to say, but the words faded away in that moment. I realized his lips were just a breath away from mine, and it felt like there was no going back. "Judith," he said, stepping closer to me, his eyes locked onto mine, his voice deep and full of emotion. "I need to tell you something. I can't keep it inside any longer." He paused for a few seconds, taking a deep breath. "I like you, but it's not just a simple crush. I've felt this way about you for a long time, and I've tried to hide it, but I can't." His words filled the room, washing over me like a wave of heat. My heart sped up, my mind was spinning. "Jake, I whispered, but in that moment I realized something else. I was drawn to him too, and there was no denying it anymore. Jake stepped even closer. We were only a breath apart. Now his hands gently found their way to my waist. "Ever since I saw you for the first time, I've seen you like this, Judith. You have to understand that." As he finished his words, he slowly leaned down and his lips softly met mine. My breath caught the warmth of his lips, combined with the touch of his hands, made every boundary between us completely melt away when the kiss ended. He looked into my eyes for a moment, but that look wasn't a question, it was an answer. At that moment, there was no going back. My hands reached for the straps of my dress, and I slowly slid them off my shoulders. The silk fabric slipped down my body, pulling at my feet. The candlelight in the room cast a glow over my bare skin, and I saw the admiration in Jake's eyes deepen. He didn't say a word. Words weren't needed in that moment. His hands gently wrapped around my waist, pulling me toward the large couch that night. Everything changed. The bond between us. The closeness. It was no longer something we could deny. I leaned back onto the couch, my heart pounding, my breath uneven. Jake looked into my eyes and gave me a soft smile. He removed his clothes and tossed them beside my dress. Every barrier between us had completely disappeared. He leaned over me, his hands gently resting on my waist. When his lips planted a warm kiss on my neck, a shiver ran through my entire body. That shiver wasn't just from his touch. It was from something huge that I hadn't felt in a long time, stirring inside me. His lips slowly moved from my neck to my shoulder, and an intensity I'd never felt before rose within me, almost instinctively. My hands found his back. I could feel the tension in his muscles, the heat radiating from his body. Jake's breath left a mark on my skin, and with every touch he pulled me closer to him. "Judith," he whispered, his voice low and filled with emotion. "You're even more beautiful than I ever imagined." With that, everything sped up. I could feel the sincerity in his words as I looked at him, but his firm movements pulled me away from the emotions and into something entirely different, a raw, uncontrollable excitement. His lips met mine again, this time more passionately, more deeply. My hands found their way into his hair as the intensity of the moment drowned out every thought in my mind. With my other hand, I gripped the couch cover tightly. I struggled to keep myself quiet. I tried to open my eyes in that moment, but my body had taken over. My muscles tensed, and with every touch, it felt like waves of energy were coursing through me. Jake's kisses trailed lower, moving down my neck. His hands glided over my skin, leaving a trail of warmth that spread across my body. I gave myself over to him completely, my thoughts consumed by the intensity of the moment. He was over me. He was over me, his eyes filled with a mix of surprise and intense desire. His breathing had quickened, and there was an uncontrollable tremble in his voice. "Is this a dream, Judith?" he whispered. In that moment, I tried to open my eyes, but my body had taken over. My gaze fixed on the ceiling as my hands gripped the blanket tighter and tighter. Jake leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine. His lips brushed against my ear as he spoke. "Judith, you're the one making me feel this way. I never imagined you like this," but his breath was shallow and uneven. "You're more real than anything else." And then he didn't stop. I was trembling so much I thought I'd lose myself completely, and finally Jake let himself go as well. This wasn't a dream, this was a reality I had unknowingly been waiting for years. Let me just say, our story doesn't end here. If you've made it this far, I know my story has deeply moved you. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss a single thing. Make sure to hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story.